Hey everyone, it's Types, and today I'm talking about Regidrago V-Star. Regidrago V-Star is a really interesting Pokemon that it just I don't exactly know what to say about it in just a few sentences. So I'm making a whole video on it because it was not that good for a while. It was kind of not consistent or powerful, but well, let's just talk about that. So, Regidrago V-Star, if you don't know what it does, it's a Pokemon V-Star, so it gives up two prizes. It's an evolution, essentially, a stage one, and it has its attack your Apex Dragon, which does for Grass, Fire. Choose an attack from Dragon Pokemon in your Disco Pile and use it as this attack, and so you don't need that energy of whatever Pokemon you're copying, but Grass, Fire is a pretty awkward attack cost. It's not crazy for a dragon Pokemon, but it's certainly not the easiest. And so powering this up has always been a bit of an issue. There was like Fortress EX, and that wasn't so good. But there have been some other ones which we'll talk about, which have been okay and I'd say pretty interesting. But then we also have a V-Star Power. You can only use one V-Star Power per game, and in many versions of the deck, or at least some versions of the deck, if you're playing it with Arceus, which was one way to play it, which I realized I wasn't going to talk about in this video, but that's one way to power it up. You wouldn't be using this V-Star power, but it is still pretty good. Legacy Star is the V-Star power. It's an ability, and during your turn, you may discard the top, or you discard the top 7 cards of your deck, and then you put up to 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. These could be the cards you've discarded or not. They could be whatever, right? So this is great for recovery, and it's also solid for setup. Arguably, it's more used for setup, but the recovery ability is insane because it just lets you literally recover any 2 cards from your discard pile, but you do have to mill yourself 7, which is detrimental. But if you're winning the game using this V's to power, like near the end, it's insane. And early on, it's pretty good for setup, especially because you need the Dragon Pokemon in your discard pile, so this will get some there. But in terms of powering this up, you did have Gardenia's Vigor as the first option. This card has not seen a lot of competitive play because it's not so good. But what it does is you draw 2 cards, and if you drew any cards this way, attach up to 2 grass energy from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. And of course, that Pokemon would be Regidrago V-Star, which needs 2 grass, and then you need to fire some other way. However, for a long time, well, there was a card called Welder, and that was a good card. That was definitely good. It saw a lot of like play. It was insanely good, and it was similar to Gardenia's Vigor. There are 2 differences though. Welder had better targets to accelerate energy to, and also Gardenia's Vigor doesn't have the ways to get energy into your hand like Welder did. Welder was fire energy, and there was no, not Magmation. There was Giant Hearth, and there was Fire Crystal and Fiery Flint, and Fire has just historically been a better type than Grass in terms of attackers. So Gardenia's Vigor has not had great targets. However, recently with well, a different card we'll talk about, Gardenia's Vigor has become better. Although I would not say it's the best way to play Regidrago V-Star. I also said there is Arceus V-Star, which is a way to power up Regidrago V-Star. However, Arceus V-Star powers it up using an attack, which accelerates energy. It's not a bad Pokemon. It's a very good Pokemon, but it isn't super fast. And so Regidrago V-Star, it's a V-Star. I said it's like a stage 1. You want to be attacking with it turn 2, ideally, and attacking using a variety of options, but something that's just really solid. And Arceus V-Star's damage output isn't bad, but it's not, the same level that Regidrago V-Star can hit. So Regidrago V-Star has a few different attackers. The first one we'll talk about is going to be Duraludon VMAX. And again, the attack cost does not matter at all. Unless it has some other attack cost that's not just energies. So we do have Gmax Pulverization here, though, which does 220 damage and hits through effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. And there are a few other Pokemon that hit through effects on Pokemon that we'll talk about later. But Duraludon VMAX here is, it's solid, right? 220 is decent. Consider Arceus V-Star wasn't enough. That does 200, but 220 is, well, it's 20 more. But realistically, it's like 50 more because Arceus V-Star is often going to have double turbo. So hitting 220 is actually a really solid number to hit. It's enough to knock out really any basic Pokemon in the entire game and any single prize Pokemon in the entire game. There are of course, some exceptions to that, but it's solid. However, this card ends up rotating. It's not actually in standard at the time of posting and recording this video, so whatever. Not too much to say about this card, but let's talk about the other attackers. Next, we have Giratina Vstar. This does 280 for Grass, Psychic, and Colorless, and then you put 2 energy attached to your Pokemon in the Lost Zone. Giratina Vstar has been a very, very powerful Pokemon since it's come out. It's been probably a top 5 deck since its entire time in format, which is really impressive. But then you have the downside, that you have to loss in 2 energy from your Pokemon in play, and that is not so good. You also have a V-Star power here. It's essentially unusable within Regidrago V-Star. I don't think I've ever seen it used. It's possible. I don't know. I've never seen it used. So the 280 here is 280 is really nice. You're looking at Giratina V-Star. You're looking at Regidrago V-Star. I mentioned Arceus V-Star. They all have 280 HP. So this will knock out really any Pokemon V-Star. Again, there are exceptions, but any V-Star and again, any single Prizer and any basic Pokemon. So, really solid attack here, really solid damage number to hit. There is also Koraidon EX. It's pretty much the same thing. Doesn't have the downside of loss only 2 energy attached to your Pokemon, but it does have the downside of damaging yourself. 280 versus 220 though, those aren't like drastically different numbers. It's 60 more damage, which is nice and it is very meaningful, but it's not like super versatile. Because now I want to talk about what a toolbox deck is. For those of you who don't know what a toolbox deck is, and this is often abbreviated as a box deck, but a toolbox deck is a deck that has lots of different tools. Tools being options, generally attackers, but they could be ability. I don't know. It generally attackers or attacks. In this case, you would only have one attacker on Regidrago V-Star, I guess, but then you're copying different stuff like Duraludon VMAX, Giratina V-Star, and other stuff. So you want lots of different options, though. If all your different options are actually just kind of like the same, like Giratina V-Star hitting 280, Duraludon VMAX hitting 220, and we'll see a lot of other attackers hitting very similar damage outputs, then, your toolbox tools aren't that different. And so there's not like, it's like in an actual toolbox having like a hammer instead of like a hammer and a screwdriver and like players or something. You had like a hammer and like another hammer and another hammer. So we had some issues here. The next attack we're going to talk about is going to be Hisuian Goodra V-Star, which, again, a 3 energy attacker. So most of these attackers are 3 energy attackers. Somewhat too, but there's some differences, but they're certainly not easy attack costs. That generally means it's good. If it was easy to attack with, why do you need to copy it with Regidrago V-Star? But Wheeling Iron here, we see 200 damage. 200, as I said, common damage output for a lot of these. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 80 less damage from attacks. So taking less damage is really nice. Regidrago V-Star having 280 HP is actually tankier than Hisuian Goodra V-Star, but doesn't have its V-Star power, so it's not really tankier, but it still makes Regidrago V-Star a very tanky Pokemon, but 80 more on to 280, getting up to 360 HP is high. I mean, it's higher than any raw HP in the game right now, which is nice, but also there are certainly things that can knock it out. Pokemon that are one-shotting other Pokemon are probably one-shotting you still if you're looking at something like Chien-Pao EX. I guess that's the main one I'm looking at there, but that one can still one-shot you. But it is still pretty good. There's certainly decks that aren't hitting a lot of damage. Say Cramorant within the Lost Zone box deck is going to be hitting only 110 damage, but that's knocked down to 30, so that's pretty nice. And again, 200 damage, really solid, but not one-shotting things. I said that Arceus V-Star's 200 damage is like not always enough, so Hisuian Goodra V-Star's 200 damage not always enough. But that being said, we're in a similar range here. The weak attack doing 200, the big attack doing 280, not that big of a difference. Giratina V-Star, and even more so Hisuian Goodra V-Star, are crucial parts of Lost Zone now. As I said, Duraludon VMAX rotated, though. So that one is not a part of Regidrago now, or really much at all. I found a Regidrago deck, but yeah, most of the time it was not played with Regidrago. But then we come to the last one. This card was introduced, or the last one when Regidrago was released, which is going to be Dragonite, or I guess the second to last one. But Dragonite here, released at the same time as Regidrago V-Star, is an intended partner. I said that powering up one Regidrago V-Star was awkward. Powering up the next one is also awkward. You can power it up, again, go through the same process of, say, Gardenia's Vigor, Arceus V-Star, or whatever, but that's awkward to do multiple times. even it's awkward once, but doing it again is awkward, even more awkward. But then we have Energy Hurricane here on Dragonite, a stage 2 4 energies. In normal gameplay, this would never happen because it's just so hard to power up. But within Regidrago Vstar, it's the same attack cost as everything else, and it's going to do 180. Again, a very similar range of damage here. But search your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. This will unsurprisingly be used to power up the next Regidrago V-Star and allow you to stream attackers back to back to back, which is useful and it is a solid option in Regidrago V-Star, but it's not always played because you can power it up, as I said, using whatever process you use to power up the first one, most likely. So Dragonite isn't commonly played, but it is a solid option and one that is it's certainly all right in Regidrago V-Star, depending how you want to play it. Lastly, we do have Garchomp V. Garchomp V is an interesting attacking option. It has 2 attacks here. I mean, Dragonite also had 2 attacks. Dragonclaw isn't so good, but Sonic Strike here for 4 energy on a basic and an absurd attack cost. It does a pretty awkward attack cost. You could power it up, but it's hard. It does 220 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon Snipe, which is really nice. Can be their active, but 200. You can do 200 damage to their active in 5 ways, literally. So that's not so useful, but hitting their bench is really useful. As I said, you want to be hitting this number to be able to one-shot 2 prize Pokemon, specifically basic Pokemon, but they can be 2 prizers, and so you can snipe your opponent's 2 prize Pokemon on the bench because they're probably going to be protecting them so that they're not being knocked out. But you can use Garchomp V there, which is a pretty nice option. Additionally, Gardenia's Vigor, which I mentioned earlier, only accelerates 2 benched Pokemon, so you potentially want a Pokemon with free retreat, and Garchomp V could be that. Although if it is in play, you cannot copy it as an attacker, but having a free retreater is nice as well. Moving on, we do have some new attackers. We have Northern EX, and Northern EX was really the first, really unique piece. Giratina V-Star was the strong option. Hisuian Goodra V-Star was the defensive option, but Hisuian Goodra V-Star wasn't insanely defensive, and Giratina V-Star wasn't insanely aggressive. And then Dragonite was kind of good for stuff, but it wasn't that interesting. And same thing with Garchomp V. So you really had 2 pieces in Giratina and Hisuian Goodra V-Star, and then Duraludon V Max, but that wasn't that useful. So yeah, so you really had these 2, and then you add on Northern EX, and Northern EX is now really interesting. It has 2 really good attacks. The second one here that we'll talk about actually first is going to be Dominating Echo, which is the more expensive cost, so generally the better attack, but doing 140 damage, weaker than the other ones, but we do see some difference in damage, going the wrong way, but it is different. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any special energy cards or stadium cards from their hand. Notably, this card could be played in a deck playing the card Path to the Peak. Does that deck play it? No, but some do. So in a deck playing Path to the Peak, you could do this. You could use Path to the Peak, and here we go. I found one. Right. Okay. I don't know. I've not planned this video out, so I was expecting to find it easily. Wait, what? But I guess a lot of these decks wouldn't play Path to the Peak, but you could do that. So you could play Path to the Peak. Here we go. We found one. This is an Arceus V-Star Regidrago V-Star list. It plays Path to the Peak. You play this, and then your opponent can't play any stadium cards to bump it. Path to the Peak is really powerful, probably deserving of many videos on its own, and there are certainly some out there, but it was really good, and so you could use this card to trap Path to the Peak and play, and that was really solid. Additionally, if your opponent is playing a lot of special energy from their hand, because if they're accelerating it with Lugia V-Star, not so good, but if they're playing it from their hand, then this will just completely shut them down. So UV Max, Arceus V-Star, you're looking at double turbo energy most prominently, you are going to be shutting that card down, and that is really solid, but double turbo energy doesn't see as much play now. Path to the Peak has rotated, so Dominating Echo is not the main attack. But it was insane for some time. But then Covert Flight here for 2 colorless. Again, attack cost completely meaningless generally, but in other decks you would play this and not copy it. We do 70 damage, 70, again, not a lot. 140 is not a lot, 70 is about half of that. So you do have a really nice effect here, though. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic Pokemon. And now we're getting somewhere with the tankiness. Sure, Hisuian Goodra V-Star is going to be adding to essentially your HP and adding to the number of hits you can take, but you're going to get knocked out eventually. Northern EX, though, does not have that issue. You can just Covert Flight over and over and over again, and your opponent, if they are only using basic Pokemon to attack, or predominantly using basic Pokemon to attack, you'll just survive their hits. I mentioned Chimpao EX earlier. That just one-shots you, most likely. This will not get one-shotted by Chien-Pao EX because you won't take any damage. You're just immune to basic Pokemon. Realistically, they do have other attackers as well, though. They have the Excalibur in the Chien-Pao Excalibur deck, which is an evolution, but it's not a great attacker. And then you're just going to knock out their Excalibur and then move on with things and probably win, or at least hopefully. So you can use Covert Flight to just put yourself in a really good position. And there are decks like Raging Bull Ogerpon and Iron Hands EX decks and Lost Stone decks often run a lot of basic Pokemon, or all basic Pokemon, although Roaring Moon EX is a little different. But pretty much you can just wall off Pokemon. And this is just such a powerful option, giving you two really good attacks that are really great in certain scenarios, which is exactly what you're looking for in a Toolbox deck. And honestly, Northern EX might be the best card for Regidrago Toolbox to make it really a true Toolbox style deck. There's also Koraidon. I don't know. I mean, this card sees play in Regidrago Vstar. I promise. There we go. Someone played it. But it's just not that. I mean, you have Shred. You hit through effects of attacks. It's the same thing. And that's on the Drowdon VMAX. Essentially, it's actually less damage, but whatever. That rotating. There's also Giratina V, which is essentially the same thing. But anyways, then we have Altaria. This one's interesting. This one also sees some play. Soothing Lullaby. It does 110 for 2, and your opponent's active is now asleep. And then in between turns, you flip a coin to see if you wake up from sleep. If you're asleep, you can't do anything. But then if they need to flip 2 coins and they need to flip 2 heads. So good chance, 75% chance that they will be asleep and can't really do anything without playing a switch card, which is really nice, but not super high damage output. It's kind of like a Hail Mary style card where you need to just hope that your opponent doesn't have what they need, and then you can go ahead and buy yourself a turn and then do other stuff from there. But Altaria is not the really important Pokemon here. The really important Pokemon is, well, there's 2 cards. There's Earthen Vessel and Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. Teal Mask Ogerpon EX accelerates Grass Energy from your hand to itself, and then you can actually use Energy Switch to move the energy to Regidrago V-Star. And you need lots of energy in your hand for either Gardenia's Vigor or Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, so we have Earthen Vessel. Earthen Vessel is insane for this deck. I mentioned earlier it was really hard to get Grass Energy into your hand, or any type of energy into your hand generally, but Earthen Vessel helps out a ton, getting you 2 energies from your deck. This can be 2 Grass Energies or a Grass and a Fire, and it just allows you to get energies into your hand way easier, which is so important to smooth out the consistency. On top of that, you need to discard your Pokemon from your hand, or from your deck, from wherever, and Earthen Vessel discards a card from your hand, which is also useful. It's not like amazing, or it's not insane, but it's really, really good. I said it's not amazing, but it might be amazing for the deck, and it's certainly a really, really good card. But Earthen Vessel, just allowing you to get the energies out of your deck, get the Pokemon to your discard. It's so good and allows Gardenia's Vigor to be somewhat viable now. And then the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, it allows it to be active and be able to use the ability just very often. And lastly, in terms of the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, I guess, is going to be Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt here has attack Bellowing Thunder for 2 energy. Again, energy cost doesn't matter at all, although Burst Roar is not terrible either. But you may discard any amount of energy from your Pokemon. It does 70 for each card you discard in this way. This is really good. This is really good because, well, one, it's its own deck, but separately, it's really good because it allows you to do uncapped damage. Giratina V-Star's 280 damage is solid, but it's not going to be one-shotting everything, especially now that there are higher HP Pokemon seeing play in the form of Stage 2 EXs, which have up to 330, I guess 340 HP, but 330 in case of what actually sees play, but certainly hitting the 300s, and Raging Bolt will allow you to get there if you are able to discard 5 energy. And it's just a really solid attacking option in the deck, and arguably the main attacker if you are running Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, which allows you to get lots of energy in play. But there is one last attacker that we need to talk about currently in Standard, which is Dragapult EX, Jet Headbutt, whatever. But Phantom Dive is insane, 200 damage. Going back to the old classic with the Giratina V-Star and assuming Gudra V-Star especially, but 200 damage to the active. But then you put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. This is spread damage, and spread damage is really scary to deal with. Admittedly, 6 damage counters, 60 damage onto the bench is not a ton, but it is enough to knock out certain Pokemon. If we look at the most played deck in the past 3 months, it is Charizard EX, and one of the most important Pokemon of that deck is going to be, just show me the thing, is going to be Charmander with, there's a few different HP numbers, but if you look at the past standard format, okay, there we go. The main one was the 60 HP Charmander, so you could knock this out. And also, Pidgeot is the main engine, and Pidgey has 50 HP, so you can snipe single prizers sometimes. Additionally, oftentimes many Pokemon, have like a little over 200 HP, so you can hit them with the 200 damage, and then finish them off with the bench damage later on in the game. So you can actually two-shot two multi-prize basic Pokemon or potentially stage ones. And this is really interesting and really powerful, allowing you to just take essentially one-shots with this, but in a more roundabout way, which can be exactly what you want. And it gives you a lot more options and a lot more versatility. However, it's not a ton of bench damage, but there's a few more Pokemon we need to talk about, believe it or not, that are actually newer than Dragapult EX. That's because they're from the new mini set, which is called, what is this called? It's called, I think, Night Wanderer, but Shrouded Fable internationally. And Shrouded Fable has some really interesting cards. First of all, it has Haxorus. Axe down instantly knocks out a Pokemon with special energy attached, which is pretty interesting. You can also do 230 damage, more than some of the attacking options, but less than some of them as well. Discarding the top three from your deck, not a bad Pokemon at all, but certainly not what you want all the time either, especially with Mist Energy being one of the most common special energies, which will just stop the effect of the attack. However, there's another card which is going to be Kyurem. It's a really interesting attack here and ability as well, and just a really unique Pokemon. At least it's interesting in terms of card design, whether it's a good design or bad design. But what it certainly is powerful. It is normally water, metal, colorless, which is kind of impossible to pay. But you discard all energy from this Pokemon as well. That, again, awkward. Discarding all the energy is not good, right? I talked about the Garchomp V earlier. Said that was bad. Giratina Vstar, I didn't even say this. You can use double turbo energy to kind of reduce the cost. But Kyurem, you're losing all your energy. But what's it do? It does 110 to 3 your opponent's Pokemon. First of all, that's 330 damage, which is more than all the other attacks. Outside of Raging Bolt EX, which can, if you discard 5 energy, do more than that. But not normally. Of course, this is multi-target damage, so not single-target damage, not one-shotting Charizard EXs here, but it's one-shotting 3 single-prize basic Pokemon, or really any single-prize Pokemon outside of some of the really tanky options, or the tankier options. There are certainly a number of single prizes that will survive, but a number that won't. Most certainly won't. So this is insane. If you use this before your point's set up, you probably win the game because you just knock out all their Pokemon that they need to get going, and now they lose, probably. Potentially you discard all your energy and can't attack again, and obviously that's really bad for you, but that might not happen. And if that doesn't, you win, right? You just knock out all their Pokemon and they can't do anything, and then they lose because they don't have any Pokemon in play. Or if they do a Pokemon, it's gonna be the Pokemon that they don't need, because if they have like 5 Pokemon to play that they need. Let's say, so you take a look at Charizard EX with Pidgeot EX. Let's say they don't have Manaphy. If they do have Manaphy, this is going to be shut down. But if they don't, they can't guarantee to have Charmander and Pidgey next turn, because if they play 3 Charmanders and 3 Pidgeys, you can knock out all 3 of one. And then if they play 4 of one, then, I mean, you can knock out 3 of them, which is still really brutal. Or you could just knock out the other one. So if they put 4 Charmanders, 2 Pidgeys, you knock out 2 Pidgeys and a Charmander. And even that's super unlikely. I don't think Charizard decks always run 4 Charmanders. Pretty commonly they do, but the one might be prized. And then certainly the Pidgeys, they're not surviving. So this is pretty insane. Obviously, your opponent might be able to stop it, but then you go in with Dragapult EX, which is just gonna cut through Manaphy. So they could go in with Relor or Rabska, I think, but that's probably not happening. Kyurem, though, is so good, and this deck's going to be so good going forwards, and I think it might be a top deck with Kyurem as an option, which is just so good. It's good in other scenarios as well. Losing all your energy is certainly awkward and not something you're a big fan of, but something I think you can overcome. But overall, I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking and subscribing, hitting the notification bell as well, so you can see me play this deck when it comes out, and see me talk more about the new set, Night Wanderer or Shrouded Fable. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.